In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
In the 26th century, humanity had clawed its way to the stars through grit, determination, and the stubborn refusal to accept extinction. The United Nations Space Command stood as a testament to human ingenuity, flawed, desperate, but unbowed. Yet for all their technological advancement, for all their struggles against the Covenant onslaught, they had never encountered anything like what arrived on Reach in the autumn of 2552. No slip space rupture announced his coming. No ship breached the orbital defense grid. The auger arrays of the Pillar of Autumn, in orbit for refit, registered nothing until he was simply there. A golden radiance materializing 300 kilometers above the planet's northern continent, falling like a newborn star toward the surface. The figure descended without shuttle, without thrust pack, without any visible means of propulsion. He was a man, or something wearing the shape of one, clad in ornate armor that reflected light in ways that made tracking systems scream contradictory data. By the time ONI rapid response teams scrambled Pelican dropships to the impact site, he had already carved a crater into the highlands, the ground glass smooth and radiating heat that had nothing to do with friction. He stood at the center, 12 feet tall in armor of gold and crimson, his face hidden behind a death mask that seemed to judge all who looked upon it. In one hand, he held a sword that burned with flames the color of dying suns. The other hand was empty, palm raised as if in greeting or warning. The Marines who surrounded him, 4th Platoon, Able Company, men and women who had survived 3 Covenant incursions, felt their weapons grow heavy in their hands. Not through any physical force, but through a creeping certainty that to fire would be to commit suicide. Their lieutenant, a veteran named Caros, felt sweat bead on his temples despite the cool highland air. "Identify yourself," Caros shouted, his MA-5B assault rifle trained on center mass. "You are in restricted UNSC military space. Power down and prepare for detention." The figure's head turned toward him with predatory precision. When he spoke, his voice resonated not just through the air, but through something deeper, touching the base of every Marine's skull. "I am humanity's salvation," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "I am the architect of empire, the father of legions, and the master of mankind's destiny across 1,000,000 worlds. I have conquered the stars and bent the galaxy to human will, and I appear to have made a grievous miscalculation." He looked up at the sky, where Reach's sun cast shadows across the highland grasses, and his eyes, when they caught the light, glowed with barely contained power. "This is not my Imperium. This is not even my universe." His gaze swept across the assembled soldiers, and several actually stepped back. "Tell me, warriors of this diminished age, what year is it? What has become of humanity in my absence? And why do I sense Xenos filth corrupting the very edges of your civilization?" Lieutenant Caros keyed his comm. "Command, we need immediate backup and AKSU team. We've got a situation." The Emperor's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, you have an opportunity. If you crave stories where legends collide across the multiverse and the fate of civilizations hangs in balance, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to his works, even across the void between realities." The golden figure took a single step forward, and the Marines' weapons all simultaneously clicked to empty, their ammunition having somehow been rendered inert. Not removed, not destroyed. Simply convinced, on a molecular level, that it no longer wished to function. "Now," the Emperor continued, his psychic presence expanding outward like a tide. Bring me to whoever commands this fragmented mockery of human unity. We have much to discuss, and I suspect very little time. I can taste the stench of alien corruption on the solar wind. And I have not spent 10,000 years planning humanity's ascension to watch it crumble in some forgotten corner of possibility. He drove his burning sword into the ground, and the flames guttered out, revealing a weapon of such craftsmanship that it made standard UNSC combat knives look like sharpened rocks. My name is Revelation. I have been called the Anathema, the Omnissiah, the Master of Mankind. In the realm I shaped, I was Emperor of 1,000,000 worlds and guardian of humanity's right to exist in a hostile universe. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. Here, I am merely a castaway, seeking to understand what strange shore I have washed upon. But make no mistake, I remain what I have always been. And if humanity in this reality faces extinction from Xenos threats, the sword ignited once more, flames licking upward, then I will teach you how to wage war as it was meant to be waged, absolutely, without mercy, without hesitation, and without the weakness of doubt that I see written across every one of your faces. In orbit, ONI Section 0 had already begun making preparations. A being claiming to be the master of humanity, demonstrating capabilities that defied known physics, speaking of empires spanning 1,000,000 worlds. This was either the greatest asset humanity had ever stumbled upon, or the most dangerous threat to ever wear a human face. Possibly both. The Emperor felt their orbital surveillance, their targeting solutions being calculated and discarded, their desperate attempts to understand what he was. He allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. At least some spark of proper paranoia remained in humanity's genome. In the universe he had left behind, paranoia had kept the species alive through old night. Perhaps this reality was not entirely hopeless after all. The interrogation room beneath Reach Station Gamma was designed to contain Covenant prisoners. Energy-shielded walls, remote monitoring, and enough fail-safes to kill anything inside if it proved too dangerous. The Emperor sat in a chair that groaned under his armored weight, his hands unbound, his demeanor one of patient amusement. Across the table sat Colonel Akono Watts, ONI Section 0, a woman whose career had been built on extracting secrets from captured prophets and breaking insurrectionist cells. She had looked into the eyes of Sanshayum hierarchs and watched Spartans demonstrate their lethal capabilities without flinching. Yet the golden figure before her made her deeply uncomfortable in ways she couldn't articulate. "You claim to be from another universe," Watts began, her voice level. "One where humanity controls 1,000,000 worlds. Yet here you sit, alone, on a single colony world of a species that controls fewer than 800 planets. Controls?" The Emperor's tone carried dark amusement. "You speak of control while alien armadas burn your worlds and slaughter your people by the billions. I have tasted the psychic echoes of your civilization's terror. You do not control. You survive. There is a difference." Watt's jaw tightened. "We've survived 30 years of total war against an enemy with superior technology and numbers. We're still standing. For how much longer?" The Emperor leaned forward, and despite the table between them, Watts felt him suddenly much closer. "I have spent the last 6 hours observing your people, reading their surface thoughts, tasting their fears. Your UNSC is a military dictatorship hiding behind the fiction of civilian oversight. Your soldiers are exhausted, your resources depleted, and your leadership fragments into factions even as extinction approaches. Without intervention, You have perhaps 2 years before cascade failure. That's classified, Watts started. Everything is classified in your fractured society. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. You hide the truth from your own people, because you fear panic more than annihilation. The outer colonies burn, while the inner colonies pretend prosperity can be maintained. Your scientists develop child soldiers because you lack the conviction to do what must be done. And now you sit before me, wondering whether I am salvation or simply another problem to be eliminated. The temperature in the room dropped. Watts felt her sidearm grow cold against her hip. I am neither, the Emperor continued. I am inevitability. In my reality, humanity faced extinction from 1,000 threats: Xenos empires, demonic incursions, the creeping death of universal entropy. I forged an empire that spanned the galaxy, created armies of superhuman warriors, and bent the very laws of physics to my will. I eliminated weakness, excised corruption, and built a civilization that could withstand the weight of eternity. By becoming a tyrant, Watts said quietly, by becoming necessary. The Emperor's voice carried no defensiveness, only certainty. Democracy is a luxury afforded to species not facing extinction. Choice is precious when tomorrow is guaranteed. Your UNSC already understands this. Why else do you conscript children, augment them against their will, and deploy them as living weapons? Why else do you maintain martial law across half your territory? You have already made the calculation. You simply lack the honesty to admit it. Watts fought to maintain her composure. Dr. Halsey's Spartan program operates within ethical boundaries. Does it? The Emperor tilted his head. You steal children showing genetic potential. You condition them from age 6. You subject them to augmentation procedures with a 40% mortality rate. And you tell yourselves this is necessary, justified, moral, because the alternative is extinction. He paused. I do not judge you for this. I commend you. It means your species retains the capacity for survival. But do not insult my intelligence by pretending your hands are clean. The observation room adjacent to the interrogation chamber held 3 figures. Admiral Roland Fremont, Dr. Catherine Halsey via holographic link, and a shadowed figure whose identity was above Watts' clearance level. All 3 listened in tense silence. He knows about the Spartan program, Halsey's avatar said, fascinated rather than alarmed. Information that's compartmentalized at the highest levels. He's either reading Watts' mind, or he genuinely possesses capabilities beyond our current understanding. Both options are unacceptable, Fremont growled. If he can read minds, he's compromised every classified program on Reach. If he can't, someone leaked. Either way, you need him, the shadowed figure said. Their voice was distorted through multiple filters. The Covenant has broken through the Sigma Octanus defense grid. Projections give us 6 months before they find Reach, maybe less. If this Emperor possesses a fraction of the capabilities he claims, we cannot afford to eliminate him. We also cannot afford to trust him, Fremont countered. In the interrogation room, the Emperor was speaking again. I sense your observers, he said calmly, looking directly at the mirrored wall. The military commander struggling between duty and desperation. The scientist whose curiosity wars with caution. And the third. Interesting. Your thoughts are shielded by augmentation I do not recognize. Impressive, if crude. Watts's hand moved toward her sidearm. The Emperor didn't even glance at her. Do not bother, Colonel. I have disarmed 47 separate kill switches in this facility since my arrival. Your plasma charges, your neurotoxin dispensers, your orbital lance strike coordinates, all neutralized. I have survived assassination attempts by beings who could unmake solar systems with a thought. Your precautions are quaint. Then why allow yourself to be captured? Watts demanded. The Emperor smiled, and it was a terrible thing to witness. Because I need information, Colonel. I need to understand this reality's history, your enemy's capabilities, and your civilization's true resources. I need access to your technology, your databases, and your leadership. Most importantly, his eyes glowed with inner fire. I need to determine whether the humans of this reality are worth saving. Whether you possess the strength of will to do what must be done when I teach you the art of total war. And if we don't meet your standards, then I will build a new humanity from your ashes, as I have done before. The Emperor leaned back. But I suspect that will not be necessary. I sense potential in your species, even diminished as you are. Your Spartans especially. Crude compared to my Astartes. But the underlying principle is sound. Your slip-space technology, while primitive, shows ingenuity, and your willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. He gestured at the room around them. You have already become what you needed to become. You simply lack the vision to see it clearly. But I am here now, cast across realities by forces even I do not fully understand. And I do not believe in coincidence. If I have been brought to this reality, there is purpose. Perhaps to save you from the Xenos threat you call the Covenant. Perhaps to prevent some greater catastrophe I have not yet perceived. The Emperor stood, and Watts instinctively backed toward the door. Or perhaps, he continued, his voice dropping to something almost conversational, I am meant to discover what becomes of humanity when it faces extinction without my guidance. Whether the human spirit can triumph through its own strength, or whether my 10,000-year crusade was always necessary, always inevitable. He walked to the energy barrier, sealing the exit, and placed one palm against it. The field flickered, sparked, and died. Bring me your leaders, Colonel Watts. Bring me your scientists and your warriors. Bring me everything you know about the Covenant threat. And I will show you how an empire is built from the ruins of hope. He stepped through the doorway, and none of the guards moved to stop him. They couldn't. Their muscles refused to obey. The Emperor protects, he said, almost to himself. Even here, even now, even when humanity does not yet know it needs protecting. The Covenant assault on the agricultural colony of Circumstance was meant to be routine. A reconnaissance force glassing a minor settlement to sow terror before the main fleet arrived at Reach. 3 cruisers, 50 Seraph fighters, and enough ground troops to overwhelm the planetary militia within hours. The colony had 16,000 inhabitants, mostly farmers and mineral extractors. UNSC Command had already written them off, redirecting defensive assets to more strategic locations. The Emperor had other plans. He stood on the observation deck of the UNSC Andraste, a frigate that had been hastily reassigned as his transport after he'd simply walked out of Reach Station Gamma. Captain Helena Kurtz watched him with barely concealed unease as the Covenant fleet materialized in system, their slip space ruptures blooming like malignant flowers against the black. We need to withdraw, Kurtz said, her hands gripping the command rail. 3 cruisers against a frigate. We can't win this engagement. You are correct, the Emperor replied without looking at her. You cannot win, but I can. He closed his eyes, and every crew member on the bridge felt something shift in the air. A pressure building behind their eyes, a taste of copper on their tongues. Through the viewport, the lead Covenant cruiser suddenly veered off course, its trajectory wobbling as if drunk. "What the hell?" the navigator started. The Emperor's voice cut through the confusion, resonating with layered harmonics that made the bridge crew's vision blur. "I am speaking to them. The creatures that crew those vessels, the ones you call Covenant. I am showing them what waits inside their ships." On the tactical display, the lead cruiser's energy signature spiked erratically. Then it fired, not at the Andraste, but at its sister ship. Plasma tore through shields, boiled armor, and carved deep into the second cruiser's hull. The Covenant fleet dissolved into chaos, ships breaking formation as internal fires began to spread. "He's in their heads," Kurtz whispered, horrified and awed in equal measure. "He's making them kill each other." "Not making," the Emperor corrected, his eyes still closed, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort. "Revealing. Every species in that Covenant hierarchy carries its own hatreds, its own resentments. The Sangheili despise taking orders from the San Shayum. The Ungoi remember their rebellion and subsequent slaughter. The Kig-Yar serve only for profit. I am merely amplifying those truths, showing each species what the others truly think of them." The second cruiser exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations. The third began firing at the Seraph fighters, which scattered in panicked disarray. Some turned on each other, others simply fled into slipspace without coordinating their jumps. Then the Emperor staggered, catching himself on the viewport. Blood trickled from his nose. "Interesting," he said, his voice tight. "Their thoughts are fragmented, alien in ways I did not anticipate. And there is something else. Something behind them, urging them forward. Not voices, not in any conventional sense. More like religious fervor weaponized." He wiped the blood away. "In my universe, we called such things demons. Here they wear different masks, but the pattern remains." Captain Kurtz was already receiving damage reports from the Covenant fleet. All three cruisers were crippled or destroyed. The ground assault force had turned on itself, elites executing grunts, while jackals looted the corpses. Circumstances 16,000 inhabitants would live to see another day. "How?" Kurtz demanded. "How did you do that?" "I looked into their minds and spoke truths they could not bear to acknowledge," the Emperor said simply. "Truth is the most devastating weapon in any arsenal, Captain. It cannot be deflected by shields or armor. It simply is." He turned to face her fully. "But it cost me. This universe's laws are different from my own. Where I once could maintain such manipulation across entire star systems, here I am limited to localized engagements. And the effort drains me in ways it should not." He looked down at his hands, clenching them experimentally. "I am operating at perhaps 80% capacity. The absence of the warp, the immaterium through which I once channeled limitless power, means I draw only on internal reserves. I am still the most powerful psychic entity in this reality, but I am no longer functionally omnipotent." A grim smile. An unfamiliar sensation. The bridge doors opened, and a squad of ODSTs entered, led by a Spartan in full Mjolnir armor, Fred 104. The super soldier's visor reflected the Emperor's golden armor, revealing nothing of the man inside. "Sir," Fred addressed Captain Kurtz, not the Emperor. "ONI Section 0 has ordered us to secure the asset and return to Reach immediately. The Covenant knows someone interfered with their fleet. They'll send reinforcements." "Asset," the Emperor repeated, tasting the word. I have been called many things: God, tyrant, savior, monster, but never asset. How delightfully pragmatic. He studied Fred with obvious interest, walking forward until he stood directly before the Spartan. Even in armor, Fred was imposing. 7 feet tall, enhanced strength, reaction time measured in milliseconds. The Emperor towered over him by nearly 5 feet. "Spartan 104, the Emperor said, reading the designation painted on the armor. Conscripted at age 6, augmented at 14, survived procedures that killed 40% of your cohort. You have experienced 147 combat operations. You have killed over 2,000 enemy combatants. And you have never questioned your purpose, because purpose is all you know." Fred's hand moved fractionally toward his sidearm. "Sir, we need to move. Now." The Emperor nodded slowly. "You are loyal, efficient, deadly, but also limited, manufactured for war without understanding its true scope." He looked back at Captain Kurtz. "This is your answer to the Covenant threat? Child soldiers, however enhanced. In my Imperium, the Adeptus Astartes underwent genetic reconstruction that rewrote their biology at the chromosomal level. They possessed 3 lungs, 2 hearts, enhanced organs that could survive vacuum exposure and digest toxins for sustenance. They were transhuman weapons capable of fighting for centuries without rest. Your Spartans are impressive, but they are human plus, not human transcended. They can still be killed by simple weapons, still require standard logistics, still age and die within normal parameters. They are stopgaps, not solutions. They're the best we have," Kurtz said defensively. "Then you need better." The Emperor turned toward the exit. "Take me to Dr. Halsey, the woman whose surface thoughts I tasted earlier. She created these Spartans, yes? She will want to meet the man who perfected what she has only begun. And I will want to examine her work." As they walked through the corridors toward the hangar bay, the Emperor continued speaking, his voice carrying to Fred, despite the Spartan walking 5 meters behind. "You think I am a threat, Spartan? Your training tells you I am an unknown variable, possibly hostile, certainly dangerous. You are calculating engagement scenarios, determining if your MA5C could penetrate my armor, whether your combat knife could find joints in the plating." The Emperor glanced back. "The answer is no, but I appreciate the tactical mindset. It shows proper aggression." Fred said nothing, but his hand remained near his weapon. They reached the hangar bay, where a Pelican dropship waited with engines hot. As they boarded, alarms blared across the Andraste. More Covenant ships were emerging from slip space, a response fleet arriving faster than expected. The Emperor paused at the Pelican's boarding ramp, looking back at the tactical display visible through the hangar's control room. 8 cruisers this time, plus carriers, a true assault force. "Captain Kurtz," he called through the ship's comm system, "withdraw immediately. Do not engage. I have made my point for today. I can defend humanity in this reality. But I am not yet ready to wage war at scale. I need information, resources, and I need to understand why I am here." The Pelican launched as the Andraste executed an emergency slipspace jump, leaving circumstance behind. The colony would be glassed within hours, but 16,000 souls had been saved. A small victory that would ripple through UNSC intelligence reports, raising questions that had no easy answers. In the Pelican's troop bay, the Emperor sat among the ODSTs and Fred 104, looking remarkably at ease for someone who just mind-controlled an alien fleet into self-destruction. "Tell me about your Covenant," he said to no one in particular. "Everything. Their species, their motivations, their end goals. I have fought Xeno's empires before. The pattern is always similar: expansion justified by religious or ideological superiority, combined with technological advantage and numerical supremacy. They call it the Great Journey, Fred said after a long pause. They believe activating ancient rings called halos will transport them to paradise. They're wrong. The halos are weapons designed to sterilize the galaxy of sentient life. The Emperor went very still. Explain. The Oni research facility designated Castle Base sat buried beneath Menachite Mountain on Reach, a fortress carved from living rock and paranoia. Dr. Catherine Halsey stood in her private laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing genetic sequencing, neural mapping, and armor schematics. She didn't look up when the security doors opened. "The Emperor of Mankind," she said dryly, still focused on her work. "Age unknown, origin unknown, capabilities that violate 17 separate laws of physics. And Oni wants me to collaborate with him on improving the Spartan program." She finally turned to face him. They must be truly desperate. The Emperor entered alone, having dismissed his ODST escort with a gesture that brooked no argument. He studied the laboratory with an appraising eye, the gene forges, the surgical theaters, the stasis pods containing experimental augmentations. His expression revealed nothing. "You are humanity's brightest mind in this reality," he said. "I have walked through your memories, Dr. Halsey. Watched you calculate the acceptable losses of conscripting 75 children. Observed you justifying their pain with utilitarian mathematics. Felt you compartmentalize guilt into a locked box you visit only in the darkest hours." Halsey's face remained impassive. "If you're trying to unsettle me with psychological analysis, you'll find I've been called a monster by better people than you. I am not here to judge." The Emperor moved to one of her displays, examining a Spartan's neural augmentation schema. "I am here to teach. You created warriors. I created demigods. The difference is measurable." He gestured, and the hologram shifted without Halsey's input. New structures appearing in the brainstem, additional organ systems overlaying the Spartan physiology. The Astartes transformation required 19 separate gene seed implants, each cultivated from the genetic template of a Primarch, my sons, crafted from my own essence. The process took years and killed half the aspirants. But those who survived could fight for centuries, could survive wounds that would kill unaugmented humans instantly, could operate in environments that would melt flesh from bone. Halsey watched the schematic with undisguised fascination. Impossible. The human body can't support that level of augmentation. Cellular rejection, organ failure, neural cascade. In your current framework, correct. But you are thinking too small. The Emperor waved his hand again, and molecular diagrams appeared. You augment existing systems. I rewrote the genetic blueprint entirely. The Astartes were not humans with improvements. They were post-human weapons engineered for an age of perpetual war. And that worked? Halsey's scientific curiosity warred with her skepticism. No rejection? No catastrophic failures? 40% mortality rate during implantation. Those who survived bore scars their entire lives, psychological and physical. Many became monsters in truth, not just in function. The Emperor's voice carried weight of old regrets. But they saved humanity. For 10,000 years, they held the line against extinction. That was the price I paid, and I paid it willingly. Halsey approached the holographic display, her fingers dancing through the data. Even if this is theoretically possible, we don't have the resources. The Spartan II program consumed the UNSC's entire black budget for a decade. Creating these Astartes would require an empire's total output, yes. The Emperor nodded. Which is why we will not begin there. Your Spartans are adequate for current needs. What they require is force multiplication, better weapons, enhanced tactical doctrine, and most critically, understanding of their true enemy. He pulled up a new display with a thought. Covenant fleet formations, ship classifications, troop compositions. Information that should have been locked in UNSC encrypted databases. The Covenant is not one empire, but 7 species bound by religious fervor and political coercion. The Sangheli are warriors with honor codes that can be exploited. The Sanshayum are priest kings whose theology is built on lies. The Ungoi are slave soldiers, one rebellion away from turning on their masters. The Jiralhani are savage, but increasingly favored by the prophets, creating internal tensions. He looked at Halsey directly. You fight them as a monolithic threat. That is your first strategic error. Halsey's expression had shifted from skepticism to intense focus. You learned all of this from reading their minds during the circumstance engagement. Surface thoughts only. Their minds are alien enough that deep reading causes discomfort. The Emperor touched his temple, where dried blood still stained his skin. But surface thoughts reveal much. The Covenant teeters on internal contradictions. Faith demanding absolute certainty while political reality breeds doubt. The proper application of psychological warfare could shatter their cohesion before a single shot is fired. Onis tried infiltration, propaganda, sabotage. None of it worked. The Covenant's religious unity is too strong. Because your Oni operates with human assumptions about human psychology. Allow me to demonstrate. The Emperor closed his eyes, and suddenly Halsey felt something press against her consciousness. Not invading, but offering. An invitation. Against every instinct of caution, she accepted. Suddenly she was standing on a Covenant cruiser, watching through the eyes of a Sangheli shipmaster. She felt his contempt for the Sanshayum navigator, who questioned his orders. Felt his rage at the Ungoi, who died to flood infection and had to be incinerated, spreading spores that defiled sacred decks. Felt his growing suspicion that the Great Journey might be a lie perpetrated by the prophets to maintain control. The vision ended, and Halsey gasped, stumbling backward. The Emperor caught her arm with surprising gentleness. You see, he said quietly. They are not unified. They are fractured, held together by fear and doctrine. Apply the right pressure to the right fault lines, and the Covenant collapses from within. This is how empires fall. Not through external conquest, but through internal rot. Halsey steadied herself, mind racing. If you can read their thoughts, influence their actions, you're right. This changes everything. We've been fighting a ground war when we should have been fighting a psychological one. Partially correct. The Emperor released her arm and walked to the window overlooking the Spartan training facility below. Fred 104 and 3 other Spartans ran combat drills, their movements precise and lethal. Psychological warfare softens the enemy, but wars are won through application of force at decisive points. Your Spartans excel at this. They simply lack proper support. He turned back to Halsey. I propose a collaboration. You provide me with detailed intelligence on Covenant technology, military doctrine, and territorial holdings. You grant me access to your Forerunner research. Yes, I know about Installation 04 and your AI's discovery of Halo's true purpose. In exchange, I will enhance your Spartans' effectiveness through advanced tactical doctrine, improved weapon designs based on technologies from my reality, and most critically, I will teach you how to break the Covenant's will to fight." "And what do you get out of this?" Halsey asked. "Besides the satisfaction of saving humanity. You're not altruistic. I've met enough manipulators to recognize one." The Emperor smiled, and it carried genuine respect. "Astute. I gain a foothold in this reality. Resources to investigate why I was brought here and whether I can return to my own universe, or whether that universe still exists. I gain time to understand this cosmos's laws and limitations on my abilities. And I gain..." He paused. "Purpose. In my reality, I sat upon a golden throne, a corpse god sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily. A prisoner in my own immortality. Here, I am free. Diminished, but free. That is worth the price of service." Halsey considered this, running calculations of risk versus reward. "I'll need guarantees. If you enhance our capabilities and then decide humanity isn't worth saving, then you will have months of advanced warning as I consolidate power and resources." The Emperor interrupted. "I do not make impulsive decisions, Dr. Halsey. Empires are built on patience. If I determine this humanity is too far corrupted by weakness or incompetence, I will withdraw and build anew elsewhere in the galaxy. I will not waste effort on foundations that cannot bear weight." "Comforting," Halsey said sardonically. "It should be. It means my investment in you is genuine. Now, show me everything you know about the Forerunners. These ancient beings who built weapons to cleanse galaxies. They remind me uncomfortably of the old ones from my reality. Creatures whose technologies reshaped existence itself." His expression darkened. "If the Covenant seeks to activate these halos, believing them ascension devices when they are truly extinction weapons, then time is far shorter than your UNSC command realizes." Halsey pulled up classified files. Reports from the Pillar of Autumn's expedition to Threshold, reconnaissance data from Installation 04, xenoarchaeological analysis of Forerunner artifacts. The Emperor absorbed it all with frightening speed, his enhanced mind processing information faster than the holographic displays could refresh. "A weapon to starve the flood," he murmured. "Genocidal sterilization to deny a parasitic intelligence its food source. Desperate. Brilliant. Horrifying." He looked at Halsey. "And the Covenant worships those who built such weapons, believing activation will grant them paradise. The irony would be amusing if the stakes were not species-wide extinction. We've kept this classified at the highest levels. If the Covenant knew, they would accelerate their search for Halo installations, triggering the very apocalypse they claim to worship." The Emperor's eyes glowed softly with internal fire. "But knowledge is leverage, Dr. Halsey. The prophets hide truths from their own people. If their followers learned the great journey is a lie, learned that their gods built weapons of extinction rather than ascension." "Internal collapse," Halsey breathed. "A religious schism." "Precisely. But it must be done carefully. Release the information too early, and the prophets will simply deny it as human propaganda. Too late, and the Covenant activates a ring, killing all sentient life within the array's range." The Emperor began pacing, his strategic mind already constructing scenarios. "We need a catalyst, a Covenant believer who discovers the truth and cannot deny it. Preferably someone of high rank whose testimony cannot be easily dismissed. That would require infiltrating their hierarchy, impossible for humans, but not for Sangheili." The Emperor smiled, The elites already doubt their prophet masters. We simply need to amplify that doubt into certainty, and I know precisely how to do so." He gestured, and a new hologram appeared. A Covenant fleet formation, isolated and vulnerable. Here, within the next week, a Covenant scouting force will investigate anomalous signals near the Epsilon Eridani system. We will arrange for them to discover Forerunner records, authentic ones, modified to reveal Halo's true purpose. One of their shipmasters will be our vector. I will ensure he cannot ignore what he finds. Halsey stared at the plan taking shape before her. "You're talking about manipulating an alien mind across light years of distance. I am talking about planting seeds of doubt that will blossom into rebellion." The Emperor met her gaze. "This is how empires fall, Dr. Halsey. Not through superior firepower, but through the collapse of belief. The Covenant's faith is their strength. Make it their vulnerability, and they will destroy themselves." In the training facility below, Fred 104 completed his combat drill and looked up at the observation window. He couldn't see into Halsey's laboratory through the one-way glass, but he sensed something had changed. The war was about to shift in ways no one fully understood. The Emperor was right about one thing. Humanity needed better. The question was whether they could survive what better would cost. The Spartan training bay echoed with the sounds of controlled violence. Fists striking training dummies, boots hammering against reinforced flooring, the hydraulic hiss of Mjolnir armor compensating for superhuman movements. The Emperor stood at the observation platform beside Dr. Halsey, watching Fred 104 lead a squad through close-quarters combat drills. "They move well," the Emperor said. "Efficient, precise, but predictable. They have been trained to execute doctrine, not to adapt beyond it." Halsey bristled. "The Spartans have a 97% mission success rate across every operational theater. Their adaptability under fire is adequate for fighting conventional enemies, insufficient for fighting wars that reshape realities." The Emperor descended the stairs to the training floor without waiting for permission. The Spartans immediately stopped their exercises, weapons tracking toward the golden figure, even though they'd been briefed he was an ally. Muscle memory overriding political designation. "Spartan 104, the Emperor called out. "Attack me, full strength, lethal intent." Fred didn't move. "Sir, I'm not authorized to." "I am giving you authorization, Dr. Halsey." The Emperor glanced back at the observation deck. Halsey hesitated only a moment before keying her comm. "All Spartans, you are cleared to engage. Non-lethal force preferred, but use your judgment. Consider this a live training exercise." Fred's body language shifted instantly, from alert caution to predatory focus. He moved without telegraphing, closing the distance in 3 strides, his armored fist arcing toward the Emperor's midsection with enough force to crack concrete. The Emperor sidestepped with minimal movement, his hand catching Fred's wrist and redirecting the momentum. The Spartan compensated mid-strike, pivoting into an elbow strike that should have connected with the Emperor's throat. Instead, the Emperor was simply elsewhere, having moved faster than Fred's enhanced reaction time could track. "Better," the Emperor said. "But you're fighting human opponents. Against me, you need to anticipate 3 moves ahead, not 1. Fred tried again, this time a feint followed by a leg sweep. The Emperor allowed the sweep to connect, then used the momentum to flip entirely over Fred's attack, landing behind him. Before the Spartan could turn, the Emperor's hand rested gently against the back of Fred's helmet. "Dead," the Emperor said quietly. "If I wished it." The other Spartans, Linda 058, Kelly 087, and Will 043, moved in coordinated assault. Kelly, the fastest, came from the left, while Linda provided covering fire with a training rifle that fired impact rounds. Will charged straight ahead, using his bulk as a battering ram. The Emperor's eyes glowed softly, and suddenly all three Spartans stumbled, their movements growing sluggish as if moving through syrup. Not physical interference. Their armor reported no external force fields. This was something else. Something pressing against their minds, making their enhanced reflexes feel leaden. In my Imperium, my Astartes faced enemies who could manipulate time, reality, and consciousness itself, the Emperor said, walking casually between the struggling Spartans. Demons that existed partially in unreality. Xenos that could predict your movements before you made them. Machines that had fought wars for 60 million years. He released his psychic pressure, and the Spartans gasped as normal function returned. Your training prepares you for soldiers. I will prepare you for gods. He turned to face all four Spartans, his voice carrying across the training bay. You were taken as children and forged into weapons. You know nothing but war. In this, you are similar to my Astartes. But where you were shaped by necessity and desperation, my warriors were crafted with purpose and vision. The difference matters. Fred's breathing had barely elevated despite the exertion. With respect, sir, we've faced hunters, elites with energy swords, flood combat forms. We've survived situations that killed entire platoons of regular Marines. We know how to fight impossible odds. You know how to survive, the Emperor corrected. Survival is not victory. It is merely delayed defeat. He gestured toward the weapons rack. Take your standard loadout: MA5C assault rifle, M6G pistol, combat knife. Now engage me again, this time with intent to kill. Halsey's voice crackled over the comm. Emperor, I must object. Your objection is noted and overruled. Your Spartans need to understand what true transhuman combat entails. They need to fail against an opponent they cannot defeat through conventional means. Only then will they be ready to learn. Fred looked at his fellow Spartans. Kelly nodded fractionally. Linda was already moving toward the weapons rack. Will cracked his knuckles inside his armor, the servos whining softly. What followed was a brutal education. The Spartans attacked with the coordination of a well-oiled machine. Kelly's speed forcing the Emperor to commit to defensive positions, while Linda's precision shooting denied him safe zones. Will and Fred converged from opposite angles, creating a kill box with overlapping fields of fire. It was textbook special operations doctrine, executed flawlessly. The Emperor flowed through their attacks like water through cracks in stone. When Kelly's speed should have been overwhelming, he simply wasn't where she struck. When Linda's shots should have been unavoidable, they curved around him as if space itself bent to his will. When Fred and Will tried to pin him with mass and coordination, he touched each of their helmets in passing, gentle taps that felt like hammer blows through the neural interface. You rely on your armor, the Emperor said, not even breathing hard. Remove it. The Spartans' Mjolnir suits suddenly powered down, their HUDs going dark, servos locking in place. 4 super soldiers became 4 people trapped in half-ton coffins of dead metal. Your armor is a crutch, the Emperor continued, walking between them as they struggled against unresponsive systems. In my Imperium, Astartes fought in ceramite plate, yes, but they were deadly with or without it. Their augmentations made them weapons. The armor merely amplified what already existed. He waved his hand, and power returned to their suits. You are dangerous soldiers enhanced by technology. I will teach you to be dangerous humans who happen to wear technology." He turned toward the observation deck. "Dr. Halsey, for the next 3 weeks, I will train these 4 personally. They will learn combat techniques designed for fighting enemies that defy physical laws, psychic entities, enemies that regenerate from any wound, foes that exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. When they face the Covenant again, they will see not warriors in alien armor, but patterns to be exploited, weaknesses to be devastated, and battles to be won before the first shot is fired." Fred finally managed to speak, his voice strained. "Why are you doing this? You could just fight the Covenant yourself. You don't need us." The Emperor's expression softened slightly, the first genuinely human emotion the Spartans had seen from him. "Because I will not always be here. Because humanity must learn to save itself, not wait for salvation from without. And because..." He paused, and in that moment he looked ancient, bearing the weight of millennia. "Because I have seen what happens when civilizations become dependent on singular saviors. When I was entombed upon my golden throne, my Imperium calcified into dogma and stagnation. 10,000 years of grinding attrition because they worshipped me rather than learned from me." He walked toward the exit, then stopped. "You are humanity's finest weapons, Spartans. But weapons rust without use and break without proper maintenance. I will sharpen you. And then I will teach your species to forge more like you, until the Covenant looks upon humanity and sees not prey to be exterminated, but an empire to be feared." After he left, the 4 Spartans stood in silence. Finally, Kelly spoke. "He's not human. Not entirely." "No," Fred agreed. "But he fights for humanity. Question is whether that makes him more dangerous or less." Linda was examining her rifle, checking systems that had been psychically disabled and then restored without any physical access to the weapon. He shut down our armor with a thought. Halsey's encryption, UNSC security protocols, all of it useless against him. "Which means if he decides we're not worth saving," Will said slowly, "we can't stop him." "Then we better make sure we're worth saving," Fred said firmly. He looked at his team, brothers and sisters forged in pain and war. "He's offering to make us better. We take the training. We learn everything he's willing to teach. And if he turns on us," Fred's hand rested on his sidearm, "we find a way to kill him anyway, because that's what Spartans do. We survive." On the observation deck, Dr. Halsey watched the Emperor disappear into the corridor. Beside her, a holographic projection of Cortana, the AI created from Halsey's cloned brain, flickered into existence. "He's rewritten 17 different security protocols just by walking through the facility," Cortana reported. "I can't keep him out of any system he wants to access. It's like he's speaking directly to the code, convincing it to obey him rather than me." "Can you stop him if necessary?" Cortana's avatar frowned. "Define stop. Kill him? I have no idea if he can be killed. Inconvenience him? Maybe, if I crashed every system simultaneously and accepted massive data loss. But Catherine..." The AI's expression grew serious. "I've been analyzing his psychic signature. It's not technology. It's something fundamental to how he interacts with reality. And it's degrading." Halsey turned sharply. "Explain." "When he arrived, his energy readings were off the scale. Now they're only moderately impossible. He's burning through his reserves, and this universe isn't replenishing them the way his native reality apparently did. Best estimate? He's operating at 75% capacity and dropping approximately 1% per week." How long until he's vulnerable? 18 months, maybe 2 years, before he's down to human normal. But Catherine, Cortana met her creator's eyes. That assumes linear degradation. If he finds a way to adapt, to tap into whatever energy sources exist in this universe, slip space radiation, vacuum energy, human psychic potential, he could stabilize or even grow stronger. We're dealing with an intellect that built galactic civilizations. He will adapt. Halsey stared at the empty training floor where the Emperor had so casually dominated 4 of humanity's finest warriors. Then we have a choice. We use him while we can, extract every advantage his knowledge provides, and pray his degradation continues. Or we help him stabilize, ensure his loyalty, and hope he truly believes in protecting humanity rather than ruling it. You're asking whether we should bet on human ability to eventually match him, or on his good intentions. I'm asking, Halsey said quietly, whether we're about to repeat the same mistake the Covenant made, putting our faith in something we don't understand because we're too desperate to ask the right questions. Below, the Spartans resumed their training, moving through katas with renewed intensity. They had been shown how far they had to climb. Now they would see if they were capable of the ascent. The Emperor, walking through Castle Base's corridors toward the xenoarchaeology labs, felt the weight of millennia settle on his shoulders. He had built an Imperium once before, shaped humanity into a force capable of conquering the galaxy. And it had cost him everything: his sons corrupted, his dream perverted, his very humanity entombed in gold and veneration. Here, in this diminished reality, he had a chance to do it differently, to teach rather than command, to guide rather than rule. If he could resist the temptation to do what he knew worked, even if it destroyed as much as it saved. The xenoarchaeology section of Castle Base held humanity's most dangerous secrets. Forerunner artifacts recovered from Installation 04. Crystallized data cores containing fragments of information from a civilization that had ruled the galaxy 100,000 years before. The Emperor stood before a Forerunner luminary, a device that glowed with soft blue light, its purpose still only partially understood by UNSC scientists. Dr. Elias Carver, lead xenoarchaeologist, watched nervously as the Emperor reached toward the artifact without hesitation. "Sir, we don't know how it responds to direct contact. The energy signatures are." The Emperor's hand made contact, and the luminary blazed with brilliance that forced everyone in the lab to shield their eyes. Images flooded the room, holographic projections of star systems, mathematical equations that scrolled through the air, and something else. A voice, ancient and weary, speaking in a language that no human should understand. But the Emperor understood. Warning: parasite containment failure imminent. Array activation protocols remain available to designated reclaimers. Legacy of the Forerunners must not perish. Find the Ark. Find the connection severed, and the Emperor staggered backward, his hand smoking slightly. For a moment, his invulnerability had cracked, the Forerunner technology operating on principles that even his psychic might couldn't fully shield against. "Fascinating," he said, examining his palm where the synthetic skin had actually blistered. "Technology that operates outside conventional matter-energy frameworks. Not psychic, not mechanical, but something in between. The Forerunners were more advanced than even I anticipated." Cortana's avatar appeared beside the luminary, her expression analytical. "You understood what it said. No human has been able to translate Forerunner languages without the luminary's translation protocols." "I did not understand the language," the Emperor corrected. I understood the mathematics beneath it. All sufficiently advanced civilizations develop similar symbolic frameworks for describing universal constants. The Forerunners' mathematical lexicon shares structural similarities with technologies from my own reality. He turned to face Cortana directly. And you are not merely an artificial intelligence. You are consciousness digitized, a human mind transformed into algorithmic pattern. Remarkable. Cortana flickered slightly, her equivalent of discomfort. You can see my code structure? I can perceive the patterns of thought within it. The echo of Dr. Halsey's neural architecture, modified and enhanced, but fundamentally still human. The Emperor's gaze was clinical, but not unkind. In my Imperium, we called such things abominable intelligence. Machine consciousness was forbidden after the Iron War nearly destroyed humanity in the dark age of technology. Yet here you stand, proof that such integration is possible without catastrophic corruption. Should I be flattered or terrified? Both. The Emperor returned his attention to the luminary. This device is a key, not to physical locations, but to Forerunner systems. The Covenant has similar devices. They use them to locate Halo installations. This is why they search so desperately, why they pursue religious fervor with such intensity. They literally hold maps to their supposed salvation. Dr. Carver found his voice. You're saying the Covenant has been following Forerunner breadcrumbs? That their entire crusade is based on following instruction manuals they can barely read? Precisely. The Forerunners left their technology accessible to reclaimers, humanity, though the Covenant does not know this. They believe themselves inheritors of Forerunner legacy, when in truth they are merely scavengers. The Emperor began pacing, his strategic mind assembling pieces. This is the lever we need. The Covenant's faith is built on misunderstanding. Reveal the truth, that humanity, not the Covenant species, are the Forerunners' designated successors, and their religious unity collapses. We've known humans are reclaimers since the first Halo encounter, Cortana said. Releasing that information doesn't help us. The Covenant would just intensify their extermination efforts. Not if we weaponize the knowledge properly. The Emperor's eyes glowed softly as he formulated strategy. The prophets, the San Shayum leadership, already know this truth. They discovered it centuries ago when they first encountered Forerunner artifacts. They hide it from their own people because revelation would undermine their authority. They have built their entire hegemony on a lie. He gestured, and holographic star maps appeared, Covenant territory overlaid with Forerunner installation sites. We do not release this information broadly. We deliver it specifically to individual Sangheili commanders who still possess honor and capacity for independent thought. We show them proof their prophets have deceived them. We transform their holy crusade into a war of lies. Psychological warfare on a civilization-wide scale, Cortana murmured. Create a Covenant civil war. More than that, we accelerate existing fractures. The Sangheili already resent being supplanted by the Jiril Hanai in the Prophet's favor. The Ungoi remember their failed rebellion. The Kig-Yar served purely for profit and would abandon the Covenant if better opportunities arose. Each species has reasons to question their alliance. We simply provide them with justification. Halsey's voice came through the lab's comm system. Emperor, we have a situation. Covenant fleet detected at the edge of Epsilon Eridani system. 8 capital ships and multiple support vessels. They're conducting what appears to be archaeological surveys of outer system objects. The Emperor smiled, and it was a predator's expression. Perfect timing. Dr. Carver, prepare a data package. Every piece of evidence proving humanity's status as reclaimers, every indication the prophets have concealed this truth. Cortana, you will encode it in a format readable by Covenant translation systems, but designed to bypass their security protocols. Make it appear as a Forerunner message, not human fabrication. And then what? Cortana asked. Then I deliver it personally. The Emperor turned toward the exit. I will board one of their ships, place the information directly into their systems, and ensure it reaches the appropriate minds. A Sangheli shipmaster named Urtas Vadam commands one of those vessels. I tasted his thoughts during the circumstance engagement. He is a warrior of honor who already harbors doubts. He will be our vector. Halsey's hologram appeared beside Cortana. You're talking about boarding a Covenant capital ship alone. That's suicide. For a human, yes. For a Spartan, likely. For me. The Emperor's armor began to glow with inner fire, psychic energy manifesting as golden radiance. I have stormed demon worlds and walked the surfaces of stars. I have fought gods and won. A Covenant cruiser is merely an inconvenience. Your power is degrading, Halsey said flatly. Cortana's analysis shows you're operating below 80% capacity. Every major exertion costs you reserves you can't replenish. The Emperor paused, genuine surprise crossing his features. Your AI is more perceptive than I credited. Yes, this universe's laws limit me in ways my own reality did not. The absence of the warp, the immaterium through which I once channeled infinite power, means I draw only on internal reserves. Each use diminishes me slightly. In time, I will be reduced to merely superhuman rather than functionally divine. Then why risk it? Halsey demanded. Because time is the one resource we lack. The Emperor's voice carried urgency beneath its confidence. The Covenant searches for Halo installations. If they locate one and activate it before we can establish internal descent, all our strategies become irrelevant. We will be dead, along with all sentient life within 10,000 light years. I must act now, while I still possess the power to influence events decisively. He looked at both women, one flesh, one digital, both brilliant and both desperate. You asked why I train your Spartans, why I share knowledge rather than simply assume command. This is why. Because I will not always be capable of intervention. My power fades daily. In months, perhaps a year, I will be no more effective than a particularly gifted human psyker. You must be ready to fight this war without me. Cortana's avatar flickered with what might have been respect. You're planning your own obsolescence. I am ensuring humanity's survival does not depend on my continued function. I learned that lesson at great cost in my own reality. The Emperor's expression turned distant. For 10,000 years, my Imperium worshipped a corpse on a throne because they could not imagine existing without me. They stopped thinking, stopped innovating, stopped becoming anything more than priests tending a dead god's memory. I will not permit that fate here. Halsey studied him intently. You're afraid, not of dying. You're functionally immortal, but of being worshipped, of becoming what you were in your own universe. Terrified, the Emperor admitted with brutal honesty. I built an empire that conquered the galaxy, and it became a prison. A golden cage where my every word was scripture and my every action was dogma. Here, diminished and fading, I have a chance to be what I was always meant to be. Not a god, but a teacher. Not an emperor, but a guide. He turned toward the door. Prepare the data package. I leave within the hour, and Dr. Halsey, while I am gone, continue analyzing ways to stabilize my power degradation. Not because I wish to remain powerful, but because I suspect I will be needed for what comes after the Covenant. The flood your reports mention, it reminds me too much of enemies I faced in my own reality. Parasitic intelligence that corrupts and consumes. Such threats are never truly eliminated, only contained, and containment always fails eventually. After he left, Halsey and Cortana stood in silence for a long moment. He's playing a long game, Cortana said finally. Training Spartans, sharing technology, weakening the Covenant from within. It's all set up for a post-war reality where humanity can stand without him. Or he's lying, Halsey countered. Building trust so that when he reveals his true intentions, we're too invested to resist. Every tyrant in history has claimed to work for humanity's benefit. True. But Catherine, Cortana's avatar turned to face her creator. What if he's telling the truth? What if he genuinely wants to save us and then step aside? Wouldn't that make him unique in human history? A leader who seeks to make himself unnecessary? Halsey was quiet for a long moment, staring at the Forerunner luminary that still glowed with residual energy from the Emperor's touch. Then he's either the greatest gift humanity has ever received, she said slowly, or the most elaborate trap. And we won't know which until it's far too late to change course. She keyed her comm. All security teams, prepare for potential containment breach. If the Emperor returns damaged or compromised, we may need to implement final protocols. And someone get me Admiral Parangoski. She needs to know we're about to commit an act of war that could trigger total Covenant retaliation. Cortana flickered with dark humor. You mean more than the total war of extermination they're already waging? I mean, Halsey said grimly, the difference between them wanting us dead and them needing us dead. The Emperor's about to reveal their religion is built on lies. That makes us not just enemies, but existential threats to everything the Covenant believes. They won't stop until every human is ash. They won't stop anyway. No. But at least this way, they'll be too busy killing each other to focus entirely on killing us. In the hangar bay, the Emperor stood before a modified Oni Prowler, the Circumference, designed for stealth insertion and electronic warfare. The ship's AI core had been removed, replaced with manual controls at the Emperor's request. He would fly alone into Covenant-held space, board an enemy capital ship, and plant the seeds of religious civil war. It was insane. It was desperate. It was precisely the kind of calculated risk that had built his Imperium across 1,000,000 worlds. The difference was, this time, he didn't have legions of Astartes to support him. He had only his fading power, his 10,000-year accumulation of strategic wisdom, and the desperate hope that humanity in this reality possessed the strength to save itself. The Emperor boarded the Prowler and began pre-flight. Outside, UNSC personnel watched with mixture of hope and fear. Their greatest weapon was about to fly into the darkness, and none of them knew if he would return. The Covenant cruiser, Truth and Reconciliation, hung in the void like a vast predator, its purple hull gleaming under the distant light of Epsilon Eridanes' star. Shipmaster Artas Vadum stood on the command bridge, his mandibles tight with frustration, as his crew analyzed yet another worthless asteroid for Forerunner artifacts. Nothing, his sensor operator reported. The luminary indicates no installations in this system. The Prophet's coordinates were imprecise. Artas growled low in his throat. 3 months searching for holy sites. 3 months away from actual combat, all because the hierarchs believed ancient relics held more value than warriors' honor. The Jiralhanae were gaining favor, while the Sanghili wasted time on archaeological expeditions. It was beneath them. "Shipmaster," his tactical officer called out. "Unidentified contact. Small craft, approaching from planetary shadow. Configuration unknown, not UNSC standard. Shields to combat strength. Charge plasma torpedoes." Urtas moved to the holographic display. A tiny vessel, barely larger than a fighter, was approaching directly toward them. Suicidal. Is it a missile? Some desperate human attack? Negative. It's slowing, matching our velocity. The tactical officer's voice carried confusion. Now broadcasting on open channels, "Shipmaster, the translation matrix indicates High Forerunner dialect?" Every head on the bridge turned. High Forerunner was the sacred language of the gods, known only to the most learned San Shayum scholars. "Play it," Urtas commanded. A voice filled the bridge, powerful, layered with harmonics that made their translation equipment strain. It spoke in their own language now, but with an accent that suggested the speaker had learned it merely by listening to their communications. "Shipmaster Urtas, Vadum of the truth and reconciliation. I am the Emperor of mankind, master of 1,000,000 worlds, in a reality adjacent to your own. I come bearing information your prophets have concealed from you. Information about the Forerunners, about the great journey, and about the lies upon which your covenant is built. Lower your shields and permit me to board, or spend the rest of your existence wondering what truths you were too afraid to hear." Artas's combat instincts warred with his curiosity. "It is a human trick. They seek to infiltrate. I am no more human than you are, Ungoy," the voice interrupted, somehow hearing through their closed communications. "I am what humans can become when they transcend their limitations. I am what you worship without understanding. And I offer you a singular opportunity to hear truth before your faith leads you into extinction." The small craft was now hovering directly before the bridge viewport, and through the transparent aluminum, Urtas could see a figure in golden armor, standing in open vacuum without any visible life support. Flames wreathing his form that should not exist in airless space. "By the Forerunners," someone whispered. Artas made his decision. "Clear the auxiliary hangar. Security teams to full alert. If this being makes any hostile movement, we destroy it instantly." He keyed ship-wide communications. "All hands, we have a guest. Maintain readiness." The small craft docked smoothly, and Artas watched through internal monitors as the golden figure emerged. The Emperor walked through their corridors with the confidence of ownership, and every Sanghili warrior he passed felt their warrior instincts scream warnings. This was apex predator. This was death wearing flesh. When he arrived at the bridge, preceded by a full lance of Sanghili honor guards with plasma rifles trained on him, the Emperor surveyed the command center with obvious interest. "Beautiful," he said, his voice now speaking perfect Sanghili without any translation matrix. "Functional aesthetics combined with religious iconography. Your shipbuilders understand that warfare is as much psychological as material. I appreciate the craftsmanship." Urtas stepped forward, energy sword deactivated but ready at his hip. "You claim to bring truth. Speak it, and we shall determine if you are prophet or heretic." The Emperor's eyes glowed softly as he looked directly at Urtas. "Your prophets discovered Forerunner artifacts 400 cycles ago. Within those artifacts, they found irrefutable proof that humanity, not the Sanshayum, not the Sangheli, not any Covenant species, are the designated inheritors of Forerunner legacy. Humans are reclaimers. Forerunner systems recognize human genetic patterns and grant them access to ancient technologies. The prophets learned this truth and chose to suppress it, because revelation would destroy their authority. Lies? One of the bridge crew snarled. Human deception? Easily proven. The Emperor gestured, and holographic data streamed from his armor. Files, recordings, genetic analyses. These are Forerunner records recovered from Installation 04, which you call Halo. They specify reclaimer protocols. They identify Homo sapiens sapiens as the designated inheritor species. Your translation matrices can verify authenticity. These are not human fabrications, but Forerunner data cores. Artas stared at the scrolling information, his mind rejecting what his eyes confirmed. The data structures were authentic Forerunner. Their encryption, their symbolic languages, their mathematical frameworks all matched known artifacts. But the content? Why would the hierarchs conceal this? Artas demanded. What purpose? Power, the Emperor said simply. The prophets built their authority on being the interpreters of Forerunner will. If the Forerunners never intended the Covenant to inherit their technology, if the entire great journey is based on misunderstanding, then the prophets' right to rule evaporates. They chose political survival over truth. They chose to commit genocide against humanity, not because humans threatened them militarily, but because human existence threatens them theologically. He stepped closer to Artas, and the shipmaster's hand moved to his energy sword instinctively. You are a warrior, Artas Vadum. You fight with honor even when your prophets do not. You have seen Sangheli honor eroded as the Jiril Hanai gain favor. You have watched your warriors die for archaeological expeditions while your enemies grow stronger. You know something is wrong with the Covenant's direction. I am merely confirming what your instincts already understand. Artas's mandibles worked silently. Everything the Golden Being said resonated with doubts he'd suppressed for years. The prophet's favoritism toward the brutes, the way Sangheli concerns were dismissed, the increasing emphasis on religious fervor over martial excellence. Even if this is true, Artas said carefully, what would you have me do? Rebel against the hierarchs? Turn against the covenant that has been my life, my honor, my entire existence? I would have you think, the Emperor replied. Question, investigate. The data I've provided includes coordinates for other Forerunner installations. Visit them. Use your luminaries without prophet oversight. See for yourself what the artifacts truly say about humanity, about the Covenant, about the Great Journey. He turned to address the entire bridge crew. The Halo installations you seek are not divine transportation devices. They are weapons. Super weapons designed by the Forerunners to sterilize the galaxy of all sentient life. They were built to combat a parasitic species called the Flood, a threat that consumed entire civilizations and grew stronger with every victim. The Forerunners chose extinction over corruption, activation over surrender. They committed galactic genocide to deny the Flood its food source. The bridge erupted in shouts of denial, rage, horror. Artas held up his hand for silence, his mind racing. You speak of the parasite, the abomination that infests failed installations. Yes, the Flood. And it is not contained. It merely waits. Every Halo installation you discover increases the risk that someone will accidentally trigger an array activation. The Covenant seeks salvation and finds only extinction. The Emperor's voice dropped to something almost gentle. I do not ask you to trust me, Shipmaster. I ask you to trust Forerunner records over Sanshayum interpretations. I ask you to investigate independently before committing to a path that leads your entire species into oblivion. Is that not what honor demands? That you verify truth before accepting faith? Urtas stared at the data displays surrounding them. If he accepted this information, everything he'd fought for became meaningless. But if he rejected it without investigation, he failed his warrior's duty to understand his enemy. You risk much, coming here alone, Urtas said finally. I risk one life. You risk entire species. The Emperor's gaze was steady. I have fought in wars that spanned galaxies and lasted millennia. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have watched religious fervor destroy species more advanced than your covenant. I do not come as your enemy, Shipmaster. I come as someone who has seen this pattern before and knows how it ends. One of the bridge crew suddenly roared and fired his plasma rifle at point-blank range. The bolt struck the Emperor's armor and simply stopped, suspended in midair by invisible force, before dissipating harmlessly. Anyone else? The Emperor asked calmly. The crew fell silent. Urtas made his decision. I will investigate your claims. If they prove false, I will hunt you across this galaxy and beyond. If they prove true, his mandibles clicked with anguish. Then my entire existence has been built on lies. And the prophets have betrayed everything the covenant claims to stand for. Then you will face the most difficult choice a warrior can face. Loyalty to your people or loyalty to truth. But that is a choice for another day. The Emperor turned toward the exit. For now, simply investigate, question, and remember that the greatest betrayal is not of individuals, but of principles. As he walked back toward his vessel, Urtas called out, Why? Why risk yourself to tell us this? What do you gain from Covenant civil war? The Emperor paused in the corridor, his back still to them. I gain nothing. Humanity gains time. Time to prepare for what comes after the Covenant. Either your species destroyed by internal schism, or both our species allied against the Flood's eventual resurgence. Because mark my words, Shipmaster, the parasite will return. And when it does, all our petty conflicts will seem foolishly insignificant. He left the ship without interference. The Sangheli warriors watched him go, too shaken to stop him, too confused to know if they should. On the bridge, Urtas stared at the Forerunner data still scrolling through holographic displays. His communications officer approached hesitantly. Shipmaster, should we report this to the hierarchs? Urtas was silent for a long moment. Then, no. First, we investigate. Independently. Without Sanshayum oversight. If this data is false, we expose human deception. If it is true, his voice hardened. Then we determine what honor demands when faith and truth diverge. He looked at his crew, warriors he'd fought beside for decades. We tell no one, not the prophets, not other ships, not even our own families. If word spreads before we verify, we will all face charges of heresy. But if we are being manipulated by our own leadership, the implications hung heavy in the air. The Covenant was built on absolute religious unity. Doubt was heresy. Questioning was blasphemy. Yet the Golden Being had provided evidence that could not be easily dismissed. For the first time in his long career, Shipmaster Urtas Vadum felt the foundation of his entire worldview begin to crack. The return to Reach was not met with celebration, but with a tense, armed quarantine. The circumference was directed to a remote landing bay deep within Menachite Mountain, surrounded by 3 full platoons of ODSTs and a squad of Spartans in full battle armor. The Emperor disembarked to find Dr. Halsey, Admiral Margaret Parangoski of ONI Section 3, and a grim-faced Colonel Watts waiting for him. You initiated unauthorized first contact with a Covenant command vessel, Parangoski stated, her voice like chipped ice. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back. A small, severe woman whose presence filled the hangar more effectively than the Emperor's towering form. You potentially exposed our most critical strategic advantage, the truth about the Reclaimers, based on a psychological profile you assembled from a single engagement. Explain to me why this does not constitute a catastrophic breach of protocol and a direct threat to human security. The Emperor looked past the ODST's raised weapons, his gaze settling on Parangoski. Protocol is the refuge of bureaucrats facing extinction. Your security is an illusion maintained only by Covenant ignorance. I have replaced that ignorance with doubt, and doubt is a more potent weapon than any fleet you possess. He's right, a new voice interjected. A holographic projection of Cortana materialized beside Halsey. Long-range monitoring of Covenant BattleNet traffic shows a significant anomaly. The Truth and Reconciliation has broken formation with its fleet and is executing a high-speed slipspace jump to coordinates deep in uncharted space. Communications traffic between the remaining Covenant vessels shows a 40% increase in encrypted, point-to-point messages, bypassing standard hierarchical channels. The seeds have been planted. Parangoski's eyes never left the Emperor. Seeds of civil war, or seeds that will unite them against us with renewed fury? That depends on the character of the Sangheli, the Emperor replied. If they are the honorable warriors my psychic impressions suggest, they will investigate. They will find the truth, and they will turn on the prophets who deceived them. The Covenant will shatter from within. And if you're wrong? Watts asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. Then they will be more determined to destroy us, yes. But their efforts will be fractured, distracted by internal suspicion. The prophets will purge potential dissidents, further weakening their military structure. It is a win-win scenario, Colonel. Either they tear themselves apart, or they become too paranoid to function effectively. Halsey stepped forward, her expression unreadable. While you were gone, we analyzed the tactical data from your engagement on the Truth and Reconciliation. Your energy signatures during the plasma deflection event were 15% lower than during the circumstance incident. Cortana's projections were correct. You're fading. A ripple of tension went through the ODSTs. The Emperor's diminishing power was a closely guarded secret, and its public acknowledgement changed the calculus of everyone in the room. He was no longer an unstoppable god, but a waning asset. The Emperor did not deny it. The expenditure was necessary. The degradation is manageable. For how long? Parangoski pressed. ONI does not build long-term strategy on a failing power source. We need to know your operational lifespan. My knowledge does not degrade, the Emperor countered, a flicker of annoyance in his voice. My strategic insight remains. My understanding of xenopsychology and transhuman warfare is undiminished. You focus on the waning of one capability while ignoring the constancy of others. We focus on what keeps us alive, Parangoski said. Which brings me to my next point. Your request for resources to establish a new genetic augmentation facility is denied. The Spartan program, in its current form, is the limit of what the UNSC can ethically and logistically support. The Emperor's expression hardened. Ethics are a luxury you cannot afford. The Flood, which you have encountered in a limited form, is a galactic-level threat. Your Spartans, for all their skill, are inadequate. The Astartes template I offer would create warriors capable of fighting that threat on even terms. We are not creating your Imperial army, Halsey said sharply. We will not build an empire in your image. We are fighting to preserve humanity, not to transform it into a weapon for a crusade we never asked for. The silence that followed was profound. The fundamental schism was now laid bare. The Emperor saw the UNSC as a foundation, the first brick in a new, stronger Imperium. The UNSC saw him as a temporary, if powerful, ally to be used and contained. You misunderstand me, the Emperor said, his voice low and dangerous. I am not offering you a choice. I am describing a necessity. The Covenant is merely the prelude. The true enemy is the parasitic intelligence that forced the Forerunners to build galaxy-killing weapons. When the Flood returns in force, and it will, your Spartans and your fleets will be consumed and added to its biomass. Only transhuman warriors, immune to psychic corruption and capable of fighting in environments that would dissolve normal humans, can counter it. Then we will find another way, Parangoski stated. Your request is denied. Henceforth, all your research initiatives will be cleared through ONI Section 0. All field operations will be approved by a joint command council. You are a strategic advisor, Emperor, not a sovereign. Remember your place. It was a direct challenge to his authority, a deliberate provocation to test his reaction, to gauge how far his degradation had progressed. The ODSTs tensed, expecting a catastrophic response. The Emperor looked from Parangoski to Halsey to the ring of armed soldiers. He saw the fear, the calculation, the desperate hope that he was both powerful enough to save them and weak enough to control. He could have shattered them all in that moment. Even at 70% capacity, he could have turned their weapons to dust, reduced their minds to screaming pulp, and walked from the hangar as the undisputed master of Reach. But he did not. He laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound, devoid of humor. You learn. You actually learn. You see a powerful entity and your first instinct is not to worship, but to control, to compartmentalize, to use. There may be hope for you yet. He began to walk toward the hangar exit, the ODSTs parting before him without a command being given. Do as you wish. Hinder my efforts. Waste time with your committees and your ethics. I will continue to train the Spartans. I will continue to analyze Covenant weaknesses. And when the floodgates open and the true horror descends, you will come to me. You will beg for the weapons you now refuse, and I will give them to you, because despite your short-sightedness, you are still humanity, and I am still your protector. He paused at the doorway, looking back. The facility request is denied. Very well. I will build it myself. I do not require your permission, Admiral. Only your eventual gratitude. He left them standing in the hangar, surrounded by the evidence of their own impotence. They had drawn a line in the sand, and he had simply stepped over it. Later, in the deepest, most secure briefing room on Reach, Parangoski, Halsey, and a handful of other high-ranking officials watched the sensor logs from the Truth and Reconciliation. He walked through their ship. A fleet admiral murmured, watching the Emperor's progress through Covenant corridors. They did nothing. They just let him. He was in their minds, Halsey said. Not controlling them, but compelling them. Convincing their subconscious that he was not a threat, that he belonged there. It's a level of psychic manipulation we can't even quantify. And it's fading, Parangoski reiterated, which means our window to establish control is closing. We have two priorities. First, We milk him for every piece of strategic and technological data we can. His knowledge of plasma-based weapons alone could revolutionize our arsenal. His tactical doctrines are being integrated into the Spartan training programs as we speak. And the second priority? Halsey asked, though she already knew the answer. Parangoski's face was stone. We develop a failsafe, a way to kill him if he decides we are no longer worth saving. Cortana, I'm assigning you to this exclusively. Analyze every fluctuation in his power signature. Find a pattern, a vulnerability, something we can exploit. Cortana's avatar nodded, her expression grim. I may have already found something. The Forerunner luminary. When he touched it, it physically harmed him. Forerunner technology operates on neural physics, a science that interfaces directly with consciousness and reality. It might be the one thing in this universe that can genuinely threaten him. If we could replicate that effect, do it, Parangoski ordered. Quietly, use every resource you need. As the meeting adjourned, Halsey remained behind, staring at the frozen image of the Emperor on the Covenant Bridge. He was playing a game whose rules they barely understood, on a board that spanned galaxies and realities. They were trying to box him in with regulations and containment protocols, while he was already thinking in terms of millennia and cosmic threats. He had called himself their protector. The question haunting Halsey was simple. What happened when a protector decided the only way to save his charges was to strip them of their freedom, their identity, and their very humanity? The war with the Covenant was no longer the only one they were fighting. A colder, quieter war had just begun. A war for the soul of humanity's future. And they had just fired the first shot. The storm broke not at Reach, but at a place the ancient Forerunners had designated Installation Uro 5. The Covenant found it. True to the Emperor's prediction, the discovery did not unite them. It fractured them. The Sangheli shipmaster Urtas Vadum, his honor and faith shattered by his own investigation, confronted the High Prophets with the evidence of their deception. The result was not reconciliation, but a purge. The Jiralhanae were given the order, and the Sangheli were declared heretics. The Covenant erupted into civil war. A garbled, frantic transmission from the UNSC in amber-clad, relayed through a network of probe drones, painted a picture of hell. The elite Spartan alliance the Emperor had foreseen was happening in real time. But it was a desperate, bloody affair on a floating city called High Charity. And at the center of it all was the flood. The parasite had been unleashed, and it was consuming the holy city of the Covenant, ship by ship, body by body. On the bridge of the UNSC Everest, Fleet Admiral Lord Terrence Hood stared at the tactical display, his face ashen. They've lost control of the parasite. If it reaches a critical mass, if it captures a Covenant ship with slip space capability, it will spread beyond the Delta Halo system. The Emperor finished. He stood beside Hood, having been granted temporary command authority by a panicked UNSC Security Council. Parangoski's restrictions had evaporated in the face of galactic annihilation. The containment field around this incident is collapsing. This is no longer a local outbreak. This is the beginning of a galactic pandemic. Our forces are engaged with the Covenant loyalists, Hood said, pointing to the swirling mass of icons representing the battle around the ring world. We can't disengage to deal with the flood. If we turn our backs, the Covenant will glass the ring, and we still don't know what that will trigger. Then I will go, the Emperor said. His tone was final. The flood is a threat that cannot be defeated by conventional arms. It must be fought with fire, with absolute psychic denial, and with a will that cannot be corrupted. I am the only asset you have that meets those criteria." Hood turned to him, his expression a mixture of hope and dread. The in amber-clad's last transmission mentioned a Spartan, John 1:17. He's aboard High Charity, trying to stop the Covenant Prophet of Truth from activating the ring. If you go in, your primary objective is to support him. Your secondary objective is to contain the flood, if you cannot contain it. Hood's voice wavered. "You know what the contingency is. Sterilize the area with nuclear force. A futile gesture. The flood has already likely achieved spaceflight. This requires a strategic, not a tactical solution." The Emperor's eyes glowed with a cold, determined light. He was already clad in his full golden battle plate, his flaming sword, now named Divinitatis, held loosely in his grip. The Oni prowler unto dawn was prepped and waiting in the Everest's launch bay. "What is your solution, then?" Hood demanded. The Emperor looked at the holographic representation of Installation Aero 5. "The rings are a failsafe, a final, desperate solution built by a race that lacked the will to make the hard choice earlier. I will not make their mistake. I will not wait for the flood to achieve a critical mass that necessitates galactic genocide. I will find its coordinating intelligence, its grave mind, and I will burn it from this reality. I will teach this parasite that there are minds it cannot consume, wills it cannot break, and fires that purify so utterly that not even memory remains." The journey through the slip-space rupture to the Delta Halo system was a blur. The Unto Dawn emerged into chaos. Covenant, Loyalist, and Separatist ships blasted each other apart, while grotesque, organic-looking flood forms piloting captured vessels swarmed through the gaps. The space around High Charity was a swirling maelstrom of plasma, metal, and flesh. The Emperor guided the Prowler through the storm with preternatural skill, his mind processing trajectories and threats faster than the ship's computer. He felt it then. A vast, ancient, and hideously intelligent presence centered on the Covenant city. The Gravemind. It was a psychic black hole, a nexus of infinite hunger and cruel intellect. It was, in its own way, as potent a psychic entity as the chaos gods of his home reality, though its nature was purely physical, a perversion of biology rather than the immaterium. He breached High Charity's compromised hull, landing in a cathedral-like chamber now overgrown with pulsating, fungal flesh. The air was thick with spores and the screams of the infected. The moment his boots touched the deck, the flood knew him. They recoiled from his golden presence. The psychic aura of absolute order and human dominion acting as a natural repellent. But the Gravemind was not afraid. It was curious. "You are new. You are other. Your mind is a fortress built on foundations I do not recognize. You will be a tasty morsel, a new memory for the collective." The voice boomed, not through the air, but directly into his soul. It was a tidal wave of psychic force, carrying with it the despair of 1 trillion consumed souls. The Emperor stood firm, his own psychic might forming an impenetrable bulwark. "I am the end of your story, parasite," the Emperor's voice echoed, cutting through the psychic static. "I am the fire that cleanses. I am the silence that follows the scream." He moved forward, his sword blazing. Flood combat forms hurled themselves at him, only to be incinerated before they came within 10 meters. He was a sphere of annihilation, purging the corruption with every step. He was not fighting individuals, but a single distributed consciousness. And he could feel it learning, adapting, probing his defenses. He found the Spartan, John 1:17, in the mausoleum of the Arbiter. battling his way toward the prophet of truth. The Master Chief saw the golden giant, and for a fraction of a second, his weapon came up. "I am an ally, Spartan," the Emperor said, his voice calm amidst the carnage. "Continue your mission. Stop the prophet. I will handle the greater threat." The chief gave a single, sharp nod, the universal language of soldiers in an impossible situation, and moved on. The Emperor turned his attention inward, following the psychic spoor of the grave mind to its core. He found it in a vast, flooded chamber, a massive, tentacled horror composed of 1 billion fused corpses. Its central maw opened, and the voice returned, now tinged with a monstrous amusement. "You seek to challenge me in my heart? Foolish little king. I have consumed empires. I have worn the bodies of gods. Your fire is but a candle in the winds of eternity." "Your eternity is a lie," the Emperor declared, raising his sword. "You are nothing but a recurring error in the logic of life, and I am the correction." He unleashed his full psychic might. Golden fire erupted, scouring the chamber, vaporizing biomass faster than the grave mind could regenerate. The entity screamed, a psychic shriek that would have liquefied the brain of any mortal within a kilometer. The Emperor advanced, a god of order marching into the heart of chaos. But the cost was immense. He felt his power reserves plummeting. The grave mind was not just resisting, it was fighting back on a psychic plane, attacking him with visions of his own past failures. The betrayal of Horus, the siege of Terra, his 10,000-year imprisonment on the Golden Throne. It showed him the Imperium he built become a rotting carcass of superstition, a testament to his ultimate failure. "See? You are not a savior. You are a failure. Your Imperium is a graveyard. Join us. Become part of something that truly lasts. All that you are, we will remember." The Emperor staggered, the psychic assault striking at the core of his being. For a moment, the flames of his sword guttered. The grave mind pressed its advantage, tendrils of corrupted matter and consciousness lashing out, trying to breach his mental shields. This was the moment of truth. He could withdraw, conserve his power, and fight another day. He could trigger the Unto Dawn's nuclear warhead, sacrificing himself to cripple, but not destroy, the grave mind. Or he could do what he had always done. He could burn. He made his choice. Reaching deep into the last dregs of his transcendent power, into the fundamental energy of his soul. The Emperor did not merely push back. He unleashed a psychic singularity, a scream of pure, undiluted anathema to the parasitic existence of the flood. It was not an attack of fire, but of concept, the absolute, irrevocable assertion of self versus the collective. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The grave mind's form did not burn. It unraveled. The psychic bonds holding its billion parts together snapped. The collective consciousness fragmented into a screaming chaos of individual terrified memories before being scoured into nothingness. The biomass, deprived of its guiding will, collapsed into inert, decaying matter. The chamber fell silent. The Emperor stood alone, his golden armor now dull and scarred, the flames of his sword extinguished. He leaned heavily on the blade, his breathing ragged. He had won. He had destroyed a nascent grave mind, a feat the Forerunners had believed impossible without their rings. But the victory was Pyrrhic. The effort had consumed the last of his trans-universal power reserves. The glorious, galaxy-spanning aura was gone. The being who stood in the ruins of high charity was still superhuman, still immortal, still possessed of a genius intellect. But he was now bound by the harsh, unyielding physics of the Halo universe. He was, for all intents and purposes, mortal. An alert chimed in his helmet. The Master Chief had succeeded. The Prophet was dead. But Installation 05 was priming to fire, its activation linked to the in amber-clad's crashed reactor. The Spartan's new mission was to find a way to stop it. The Emperor pushed himself upright. His war was not over. It had simply changed. He was no longer a god from another reality. He was a man with a mission, in a universe teetering on the brink. He had to find the Spartan. The next battle was already beginning. The Ark was not a world, but a forge. A megastructure hidden in extragalactic space, far beyond the reach of the Halo Array's killing pulse. It was here that the last, desperate act of the war unfolded. The Covenant Prophet of Truth had fled here with his loyalist fleet, intent on firing the rings from a position of absolute safety, baptizing the galaxy in fire and ascending on a tide of genocide. The Sangheili separatists, the UNSC, and the Flood, a new outbreak, having hitched a ride, converged on this final battlefield. The Emperor stood on the bridge of the Shadow of Intent, the Sangheili flagship commanded by the Arbiter and Artas Vadum. He was no longer a figure of radiant gold, but a grim, burnished bronze. His armor was pitted and scarred from the battle on High Charity, and the psychic fire that had once wreathed him was now banked to embers, a conscious conservation of his dwindled power. He was a strategist now, not a god emperor. The brute chieftain, Tartarus, has the activation index, the Arbiter said, his voice a low growl. He marches to the Citadel to fire the rings. The demon is in pursuit. The Flood has made planetfall, Artas Vadum added, gesturing to a tactical display showing swathes of the Ark's surface, turning a sickening, organic purple. They consolidate. They will form a new gravemind. The Emperor observed the data. The patterns were clear, the endgame inevitable. Truth's plan is folly. Firing the rings kills the Flood's food, not the Flood itself. Spores will survive in the void, waiting for new life to emerge. It is a temporary solution with a permanent cost. He turned to the Sangheili commanders. But the Flood cannot be allowed to capture the Ark. The knowledge here, the ability to build more Halos, that would be an extinction-level event. Then we are trapped between annihilation and damnation, the Arbiter stated. No, the Emperor said, a familiar, terrifying certainty returning to his voice. There is a third path. The Forerunners built this place to fire weapons. I will teach it to build a cage. He descended to the Ark's surface in a phantom, joining a combined force of Sangheili warriors and UNSC Marines holding a precarious beachhead. The sky was a sickly green, torn by the fire of battling ships. On the ground, the war was a three-way melee. The Covenant's disciplined ranks, the UNSC's desperate grit, and the Flood's mindless, overwhelming tide. The Emperor did not stride through the battle untouched. A Jiralhanae gravity hammer blow sent him staggering, the impact jarring enough to crack the ceramide of his shoulder plate. He fought with blade and bolter, a weapon he had fabricated in Castle Base's forges. His movement still preternaturally fast, his aim still flawless. But he bled now. A deep gash on his brow leaked crimson, a stark reminder of his newfound mortality. He found the Master Chief and the Arbiter at the entrance to the Citadel, having just defeated Tartarus. They had the index. The rings must not fire, the Emperor said, his voice raw. But the Flood must be contained. There is a facility here, a lesser Ark designed to study the parasite. We will lure the primary Flood mass there and trigger a localized slip-space rupture, collapsing the structure into a self-contained pocket dimension. It will be a prison, not a grave. It will require a massive power source, the chief said, his helmet tilting, and a distraction. I will be both, the Emperor replied. He looked at the Spartan, seeing in him the unyielding determination that had once defined his own custodians. You have the strength to see this through, Spartan, more than you know. The plan was audacious. As the chief and the Arbiter fought their way to the control room to deactivate the ring firing sequence, the Emperor turned and walked directly toward the advancing flood swarm. He did not run. He did not hide. He stood at the mouth of a vast canyon leading to the research facility and began to burn. It was not the glorious conflagration of before. This was a slower, more deliberate fire, drawn from the very core of his being. He became a beacon, a psychic torch of such irresistible vitality and mental fortitude that the collective flood consciousness could not ignore him. To consume him would be to gain everything he was, every memory, every secret, every shred of power that remained. It was the ultimate prize. They came. A tidal wave of corruption. A billion bodies moving as one, scrambling over each other to reach him. The Emperor held his ground, his sword carving arcs of fire, his mind a bastion against their psychic shrieks. Step by step, he gave ground, leading the horde into the canyon toward the facility. Inside the Citadel's control room, the chief deactivated the firing sequence as the Emperor had instructed. On the display, they watched the golden figure, now surrounded by a seething ocean of flesh, reach the center of the research facility. Now, Cortana, the chief said. On the Ark's surface, the Emperor felt the slip-space drive of the crashed forward unto dawn, repurposed by Cortana, begin to power up. The air crackled with nascent dimensional energy. His work was almost done. The grave mind, sensing the trap, focused its entire will upon him. Your sacrifice is meaningless. We are eternal. We are a conclusion. Nothing is eternal, the Emperor whispered, driving his sword into the facility's central power conduit. And some stories have more than one ending. He channeled the last of his psychic energy not into attack, but into stabilization, anchoring the forming slip-space bubble, ensuring the flood mass and himself with it would be cleanly severed from reality. The light around him intensified, not gold, but pure, blinding white. On the shadow of intent and on every UNSC monitor, the viewers saw a flash. When it faded, the canyon and the research facility were gone. In its place was a smooth, glassy crater and an unnerving silence. The primary flood threat and the Emperor of Mankind had vanished. The war ended not with a bang, but with a severance. The covenant was broken. The Ark was secured. The halos remained silent. Weeks later, on a rebuilt reach, a memorial service was held. The Master Chief stood at attention beside Dr. Halsey and Admiral Hood. He's gone, Hood stated, the question in his voice. He is contained, Halsey corrected, her eyes on the data slate in her hand. Cortana's analysis was definitive. The slip-space bubble is stable. It's a perfect prison. He sacrificed his freedom to ensure theirs. And his power? Hood asked. Gone, or nearly so. The energy required to anchor that rupture would have drained the last of his trans-universal reserves. If he still lives in that pocket dimension, he is as mortal as you or I. Halsey looked up at the stars. He got what he said he wanted. He was a teacher, a guide, not a god. And his final lesson was the cost of victory. In the timeless, featureless white of the slip-space prison, the Emperor of Mankind opened his eyes. He stood on a plane of energy, surrounded by the inert, frozen forms of the flood. They were statues, in a museum of his own making. He was alone. He was trapped. His great power was spent. And for the first time in 40,000 years, he was free. Free from the burden of empire. Free from the weight of worship. Free from the golden throne. He had saved a humanity, not by conquering it, but by serving it. He had forged no imperium, but he had secured a future. He sat, cross-legged on the void, and began to plan. The prison was perfect, but no prison lasted forever. The flood would eventually find a way to corrode it, and when they did, he would be waiting. Not as an emperor, but as a warden. Not as a god, but as a man. The war was over. His watch was just beginning. The arrival of the Emperor of Mankind in the Halo universe created a paradox that ultimately saved humanity, not through overwhelming force, but through strategic sacrifice. He did not build a new imperium. Instead, he dismantled the existing hegemony threatening humanity and contained the existential threat of the flood, tasks the UNSC alone could never have accomplished. His fading power became not a weakness, but the key to a sustainable victory. He was potent enough to be decisive, but finite enough to be self-limiting. His legacy in the Halo universe is one of profound ambiguity. The UNSC and the Sangheili Alliance possess advanced tactical doctrines and technological insights that will accelerate their recovery and reshape their civilizations. They know the truth that a being of near godlike power chose to spend himself for their survival, then voluntarily stepped into eternal imprisonment to ensure it. This act fundamentally challenges the Covenant's core tenet that power demands worship, offering a new paradigm, that true strength is measured by what one is willing to relinquish. The Emperor achieved what he failed to do in his own reality. He became the guide who made himself obsolete. He leaves behind a humanity that is united, wary, and stronger for having faced the abyss alongside him, rather than cowering behind him. The question of whether he is a martyr or a prisoner is irrelevant. He is, finally, exactly what he claimed to be: humanity's protector, even from across the void between dimensions. His story proves that even in the grim darkness of the far future, or the desperate struggle of the 26th century, there is more than war. There is sacrifice, there is choice, and there are endings that are not merely conclusions, but new beginnings.